This is F.D. Recovery, where we interview addicts and alcoholics.
Our aim is that through this podcast, we might help you on your journey of recovery.
Thank you for listening.
Hello, this is Frank with F.D. Recovery, and you are listening to the Weekly Intention. This portion of the podcast is where we go week to week with spiritual principles, topics, and we talk about it and see how that went in our recovery, right? If you're a recovering addict and alcoholic, we know how these spiritual principles can get. They get pretty daunting. They get pretty hard to work. We get in our head. We get in life situations that deter us, and we get life thrown at us, right? Life on life's term, right? So last week was growth. We'll talk a little bit about that before we dive into this week's weekly intention, which is going to be self-control. Self-control, right? So before we dive into that, we'll stick to the format, right? What is growth in my recovery today, and how did it work last week? Well, I've grown in so many different ways, right? The recap for the week, I've noticed on how I pause a lot more in situations, how I stop, breathe it in, take it in, right? And allow the moment to unfold exactly how it's supposed to be on God's time, right? I started noticing the difference between true power and what force is. When I force a situation, right, there's a good book from David Hawkins that is about force versus power. And I realized when I pick up some of that information from that book and also watch it in real life, that you start to notice the difference between when things are forced and when you're actually sitting in truth and sitting in your true power, right? You allow things to ebb and flow, and you connect with the consciousness within inside you, and on a physical level and spiritual level, right? There is different levels to our experience here on planet Earth, right? So, but getting back into that whole growth mind, that whole aspect of like what I used to be, what I am now, is just such a trippy thing, because sometimes we fall so far into the darkness that it's kind of hard to see where we've even grown and how we've even grown. And once we get out of that darkness, we think that we were just stagnant, but we were actually growing just in a very negative way, right? We were picking up maladaptive tools. We were learning a lot of things along the way that did grow us in a sense. Maybe it could have just led us on a destructive path, but it was growth nonetheless. We still learned things. We still exhibited habits and all that stuff, right? Even cancer is a growth we talked about last time. But even the most important thing that I realized with my growth and working the 12 steps and actually getting to this therapeutic mindset of actually trying to heal my life, right? Getting into that healing aspect rather than the destructive mode, I realized that everything about me has expanded down to my down to the vocabulary, to my energy field, right? To my conscious awareness, what I allow and block out, right? I've become a lot better than, I wouldn't say block out, but there is a sense of, I guess, apathy that you have to possess with certain things in your life, right? I just know that today I know how to not pick up those things that get brought to me that I necessarily don't want to partake in, right? My good friend John says, it's not yours if you don't pick it up, right? And that's so important. And that's another key portion to this whole growth aspect, right? We get so used to thinking that we have to participate in other people's BS, right? And not unknowingly, we think it's them, but as soon as we pick it up, it becomes our sideshow now. So I think the most important thing to this whole growth aspect and this growth mindset and just trying to expand spiritually, right? I think it's important to tie it into this whole, like, give yourself a break, right? Give yourself a break. you're gonna make a lot of mistakes. Give yourself the room to make those mistakes. Give yourself the allowance to just participate with a non-judgmental mind and a non-judgmental spirit, and just allow yourself the courtesy of being a human being, right? Sometimes we get into these ego trips and don't allow ourselves to just be who we are, right? We constantly fight realities, we constantly fight truths, we constantly negotiate with either ourselves or other people, and try to for the one thing that I used to do, and this is all speaking from my experience, it's not necessarily I'm telling people how they're living. This is all stuff I've done. So when I say we, it just means me, right? Sometimes I just get into that talk of relatability, right? So the thing with me is I've always tried to um, and I always try to project on pretty much every situation around me and manipulate it to my self gain or to meet my needs, because I was unwilling to communicate and actually speak what was on my mind for lots of different reasons. I was just talking to a buddy this morning. It's like I noticed the manipulation factors. I was just so good at it at one point. Like, and instead of just saying, "Hey, I want A, B, and C," I'd skirt around for manipulation purposes because I wanted everybody to think a certain way about me, and I would try to execute A, B, and C without actually saying, I want A, B, and C, right? So the thing about today is getting to that transparent place where you're just like, hey, this is what I want, right? Good, bad, ugly. We'll figure it out, right? The goal is to become spiritually aware and want to do good and not to do harm and all that stuff. But there is a but. There's a caveat to this. Not every decision we're going to make is going to be best for us in the future, right? There could be some lessons learned along the way, and that's the whole point of letting it go boomerang back to the whole allow yourself to be a human being, because you're not always going to make the right choice. Sometimes you're just going to screw up, and that is okay. It isn't a screw up as long as you allow yourself the lesson that life is trying to teach you, or maybe you're trying to teach you, right, your higher self and your God consciousness, right? So it's important to start tapping into that forgiveness, right? We talk about growth. You can't have growth without major and radical forgiveness, right? It's so important. I'll tell you that. I mean, that's one thing I'm working on every single day. Learn to forgive myself, learn to forgive others, and stop trying to beat myself up so much, and give myself that allowance, and give myself that space to heal and be human. It's okay, right? People make mistakes. I make mistakes. As soon as I start, we live in a very polarizing time, whether it be political, religious, whatever. There's so many differences out there, and it's super easy to allow yourself to get morally superior to somebody else based off of whatever, right? What we like to do is do this tribalism thing and start to put other people down. And if they don't agree with us, we start moralizing everything. And I just don't want to do that. The life I want to live, in my spiritual life, it knows that that's not the right way. It knows it on a very soulful level, right? As soon as I start trying to tell you you're wrong and I'm right, it's all ego, right? So that whole moral superiority doesn't work if you're really trying to heal and you're really trying to connect, moral superiority doesn't, there's no partaking in that, right? Obviously, if somebody's living a way that you don't agree with, you just don't live with them, if that makes sense. You don't have to dog them out. And we live in this world where everybody has to like throw things in each other's face, and that's not, when it comes to me, there's no right or wrong, right? There's just, is it working, and is it beneficial to my life, and am I learning on a soulful level, and am I growing, right? We take it back to growth. If it's hindering my growth and hindering the growth of others, and it's causing harm to me and harm to them, then I do my best to learn to heal that portion within inside me, right? It's never what's going on in the world. It's merely a reflection always within me. As soon as I'm participating in life, how is it happening inside me? It's never what's happening around me. Oh yeah, I'm gonna blame everything when I'm in that state. I used to do that so much. It's ridiculous how much I used to do that. And it's ridiculous how much I have to train myself not to get back to that same old familiar stinking thinking, right? So when we're talking about growth, and when I'm talking about growth in my life and in my recovery, it's a big step back and go, hey man, you're doing okay. It's not about everyone else. Let's see what's working in this life, and let's continue to progress. Let's continue to grow, right? The thing on here is progress, not perfection, baby. And as soon as we can narrow that down, and we live a much better life doing it this way. I like to joke around and have fun today, right? Not every day is going to be the top shelf type feelings. And sometimes I just worked 2 weeks in a row feeling like dog shit, One of the days I threw up, and I was still showed up to work and got things done. I didn't have COVID, so I went to work. Easy as that. Easy peasy, right? So, all right, let's close out growth. But if you're out there and you're struggling and you're not seeing your own growth, take a step back, slow down, look at the wins. Start your gratitude list again. Gratitude is such a beautiful tool when you're starting to look at the doom and gloom in life. Remember, slow down, take a breath, and look at the things that you've accomplished. Look at the wins, man. Even the bad stuff, all the bad stuff had some good stuff in it because you learned some lessons. All the strength you have today is because all the bullshit you had to go through to get there, right? So it's super important that you give yourself a fucking break. Please, I beg you. All right, let's move on from growth and in our recovery and in our life. Let's try to grow, guys, man. Let's do this shit. I believe in you, and I love you. If you haven't heard that today, I love you, right? And so let's go self-control, right? And the big hang up I had with this was, I'm like, well, I've done discipline, right? All right. And I'm like, well, that's the same thing as self-control. And I was like, wait, maybe it's not. Maybe I should start looking this up. And I went, what's the difference between self-control and discipline? And it lays it out. Self-control is the immediate, conscious effort to regulate emotions, impulses, and behavior. Resisting temptations is a good example. Often acting as a no or stop signal, as discipline is the consistent, often automated application of routines, habits to achieve long-term goals, acting a yes, an action signal, right? So, action versus inhibition. Self-control is about stopping bad habits, enacting, while discipline is about starting and maintaining good habits, right? So it brings up the question is, okay, I was like, man, I was all self-control. I mean, I was all talking about discipline and all that. And I'm like, just thinking that self-control is the stopping portion of it. And the no's every time you want, like for me, like I'm having my biggest struggle with self-control right now is I've really honed in on my diet, and I really realized how much I was eating, right? And I got up to around 265 pounds, and I was really getting overweight again. And I'm like, you know what? I need to start scaling this back. So I started giving myself a calorie deficit, and working out, because I really love working out and the whole aspect, and work gets me spiritually right. And so I started participating in self-control, right? And I'll tell you what, as an addict and a fat ass in the art of fat assery, it's really hard to eat a 1,500 calorie diet, especially when you're almost double that. I think I was a well over 4,000 calorie diet, right? And there's nothing more difficult because you're dealing with, I didn't realize how much I ate out of boredom, ate out of emotions. I didn't realize as soon as I get stressed or some bad news or had to work longer on my shift, had to go and just go eat a little extra meal because it was feeding something emotionally. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I am powerless over this addiction, right? And as soon as we put down the pipe, we pick up the fork. I heard that a while ago, right? I think I heard it from my boy Joe, and but I, that's so true. And I'm like, I'm just transferring this energy into something else. Obviously, 260. I have a decent amount of muscle. I'm really strong. Blah blah blah. So I rationalized it. So, sorry. So I'm getting to this realm of like, okay, this is not the life I want to live. I don't want excess weight on me. And there's nothing wrong with people that are bigger or being bigger. It's just that's not my goal. My goal is to be lighter, move faster, be stronger. And I want to live a long life. And I want to be able to move around. And the biggest thing for me is I sit on the ground with my daughter and my body can't do it. It hurts, right? And I'm like, you know what, I don't like this. I want to be able to move. I want to have the energy to play with my daughter and do everything I want to do, right? So I'm like, okay. So today, I'm really practicing self-control. I'm around 1,600 calories on my diet today, and I've been doing it pretty consistent, right? And that's pretty low. So and I'm working out like crazy. So I compensate that with a very high protein intake. So I don't lose too much muscle during the whole cutting process. But when we talk about self-control, I didn't realize how much was really connected to self-control with anything, whether it's trying to kick a habit or trying to regulate your eating and try to eat proper and also weigh everything out, all those things, right? Not the dope. Not weighing out the dope. I know I just triggered you guys, but using using a scale for what it's actually intended to with food or normal things people use scales for. But getting to this self-control mindset and going, oh my gosh, there's so much I just let spiral out of control. And due to that, due to my powerlessness to all of it, due to not addressing it and just kind of living willy-nilly and not allowing God in the process and not allowing myself to focus on it and be like, hey, this is a spiritual mission I'm on, and it may look like it's just physical, but it's not. There's a very spiritual thing that's happening with me is I've got to let go of all this emotional attachment that I had with food, let go with the thought process behind it, the addictive behavior, the emotional attachment that I have. Because I remember when I was young and I was going through all my trauma as a kid, I remember going into these fits of eating where it was comforting me, and I didn't realize that, right? I was eating at one point I was well over 320, right? And I'm only 5'10" roughly. And I was well over 250 at a young age, right? So, over 320 pounds is very unhealthy, especially for my height. And so that being said, right, learning these things about myself and talk about growth, right? I'm learning and discovering all these things about myself because I'm willing to do the work, and I don't want to be stuck as the old Frank that keeps complaining and blaming. I'm done with that shit. I'm so freaking done with being my worst enemy. It's me versus me, right? And I just want to get to a point where, what I'm creating today, I just want to be at a point where like I want to be my best friend. And I'm there in a lot of ways. But to just say I'm fully there is a complete lie, right? It's a forever mission. We're always going to be learning about ourselves and learning to love ourselves more. But there was a time and place where I was unlovable to to my family, to myself, to everyone, right? And now I'm finally getting to a place where I start loving myself again, and you start discovering, and what happens is you start learning things about yourself that you don't necessarily like, right? And so you got to forgive yourself on those processes, learn to change them, because what you don't change, you choose. What you don't change, you choose. Once you become consciously aware of whatever your abnormality is with it all, and you don't do anything about it, then you're choosing it. You're 100% choosing it. And I had to get to that point, right? I'm like, holy shit, I'm choosing to be overweight. I'm choosing to have this emotional attachment. I'm choosing to have this bondage, this chains in my life. And I was doing that with the drugs. But when it comes to all this other stuff, right, I didn't realize. When it came to pornography, I didn't realize how addicted I was. I didn't realize all that. Right. And I've done so much better with anything pornography or any kind of sex online, anything like that. I'm not ashamed to talk about that. Why the hell would I be ashamed to talk about it? That's just another chain and bondage. I'm not willing to live that way right now. So today I've take my wins where I get them. And I know if I hold things back, right, what will happen if someone hears me talking about this stuff, it gives them permission to be able to talk about it and then therefore heal it and get help. It's important that we bring the real to the table, right? I've done so much better with all that shit, right? And what's really helped me is having a daughter, another daughter, but being sober during this process of having another kid is a big deal, right? So just getting to that, getting to the nitty gritty and getting to that self-reflection where, man, you're just trying to be a better person, right? You're just trying to do fucking better. You're just trying to elevate your body, mind, and soul to the next fucking plateau. And you're not trying to do it because you're trying to get recognition, your blah, 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 your ego, fuck all that, man. It might be that way at first, but hey, somewhere along the lines, God creeps his way in and fucking it's contagious, and all of a sudden you're living your purpose. You're starting to do better things, say better things, eat better things, reflect better, right? Because as you think it, so it shall be. So the most important thing I can leave you with today when we're talking about self-control is it's important to be conscious of this all. Learn about the things that are tempting you, all those impulsive behaviors, all those things. Start watching that. Also give yourself a break, right? At first, you're going to notice a lot of stuff that you may not like, and you're going to be like, man, I should be further along. But hey, right now you're discovering about yourself. If you're on this process, just discover without judgment right now. I know it's hard, but if you're out there, you're struggling with judgment and you think you should be further than you are, well, guess what? You're right where you need to be, because where the hell else would you be, right? So it's important. Remember, it's God's timing. So let's move into this week with a little bit of self-control and look at some of the things that we're lacking in self-control, impulse control, behaviors, things like that. Temptation. They call it temperance. You know what I mean? Temperance, sorry. So let's move to this week with a little bit of self-control and see where we can do better, guys. That is it. This is Frank with F.D. Recovery. We out. Love you. Peace.
Thank you for tuning in to F.D. Recovery. A reminder, be kind to yourself on this journey of recovery. Also, call your sponsor, get connected to local support groups, and for one day at a time, stay clean and sober.